What's up? What's up, Richard, man? Oh, bro. Good. Things good, man. Other people showing up here. Kick it right off, man. So, you know me. James. Going to talk about building a community. Something we've been talking about for a while, man. A lot of people are into homesteading these days. I've been talking about buying a ranch for out of the military. Something along the lines of like, what the hippies were doing in the city. Alternative community or like an intentional kind of, alternative economic systemic lines, different than what we're doing. Later system. I invited a bunch of people to talk about and share their ideas on how we could do that better than what can we even do. So when I think about it, it reminds me a lot of Plato's Republic. They did this back in like 300 BC or whatever. Plato, Socrates talking to how to form an ideal government. So in Plato's Republic, they start off with this conversation about justice. What is justice? Kind of have just a little argument about that. One guy gets pissed off and leaves. Continue the because he was kind of at first the conversation was about, is it better to be just or unjust? Better to be a good person or do whatever you want. Other guy was just saying, like, he was basically saying that justice isn't a real thing. Only like a tool that the powerful and the rich use to keep people in line, basically, and to make them do what they want. It's like all these rules. If you don't, then you're going to jail, basically, and that's the way that they get what they want from people. So he was saying it's better to just not do that as much as you can, and they argue a little bit about it. He kind of says there's a really interesting part in there too. I think that J.R.R. Tolkien took the idea of the One Ring from, because they reference something called the Ring of Ganges, and they don't even explain it really. It's just kind of like they all know what they're talking about. It's like if we were referencing, Jurassic Park or something. Everybody knew what they were talking about. But he makes reference to the Ring of Ganges, and apparently just you can tell by the context of what they're talking about that the ring makes you invisible. And if you had this ring, like, would you use it to do good, or would you use it to, fill your wildest dreams, basically? And he's saying most people would just use it for selfish reasons. That's how people are, and that's why, like, being just stupid. That's one of the things that But that's the guy who gets mad. Because Socrates. He's cool, calm, and collected, but. Oh, thanks, bro. Oh, dude. I don't know what that audio. Somebody just liked the stream thing is. Yeah, he says that should just do whatever you want. Socrates, he's always kind of cool, calm, and collected. He like, well, what about this? What about this? Almost like a child, man, like asking questions like that doesn't quite make sense. And eventually, the guy just and then the rest of them all continued their conversation. But what they start talking about after he leaves is like, all right. Well, he says that it's hard to see, in reference to what he was saying. Basically, if you're looking at yourself and what's right for you, it's hard to see what's right for the city or the society, sometimes you have to step back and look at the big picture. Make some analogy to basically like a billboard, like writing on a wall in large letters. And if you're standing too close to the wall, you can't read what it says. You have to take a few steps back and look at the whole wall to see what the writing says. So he's making this analogy in order to tell like what justice really is and how to be a good person. You have to look at how society works. Then that might give us an idea of what we're supposed to be doing. They launch onto the whole like question and answer session, back and forth kind of discussion about, all right, well, if it was me and a bunch of people, we're going to start our own, what are we going to need? How is it going to start growing plants? We're going to start doing this. You know, and then they start bringing up like possibilities. Well, if somebody comes and like tries to steal our stuff, you know, we're people to protect us. So they just kind of explore all these ideas that they have. Come up with this really crazy idea of, they address so many problems. You talk about nepotism, talk about greed, they talk about all these like corrupting factors and how that they might possibly mitigate the government. So they come up with this system that almost like a religion, cultural creed or doctrine, or those that they tell people to born and their soul is like infused with a color of metal, a type of silver, gold, and so the bronze people are, most people are bronze. That means you're born to be working class. And they also talk about professions and all. It's better if, if your father was a shoemaker, you're a shoemaker, because that knowledge gets passed down and that's how trade. Pretty much settle on that. That's most people. They say that some people are born with like Olympian type people who are real driven towards physical things. I guess you could also say it's kind of like if you've ever seen or read the Divergent, ones who are like the police, because that's basically what these people are. They're like the silver class, like the military and the police protectors. They call them the guardian class. It's also like a very early argument for women's service in the military. Talk about why women should be able to be group. The short version of it is he says that you go to the gymnasium back then, and sometimes you see some really weak and frail men, but you see some like muscle mommies there. And those muscle mommies could kick the shit out of the frail guys. Maybe those women, even though they might not be able to beat the best men, the jacked in shape, aggro, crazy dudes, but they have this like drive inside of them that's pushing them towards that. Like physicality, I guess. And also, way that most don't include women, so they'd be putting themselves at a disadvantage. So they settle on that, as far as I remember it. And then the top class, this is like the craziest one. What are you doing? So the top class of people was the gold, right? These are this like the ruling class, leaders, and they're like, how do we get around all this shit that always happens? Nepotism, all the corrupting things. They decide that these people shouldn't be allowed to own property at all. Everything they have is given to them by the working class, protected by the guardians. They're also not allowed to know who their kids are. Love life, their reproduction is supposed to take place like orgies, and they don't get to know who their kids are. Plus, their kids might not even stay in the ruling class, guardians, or they call it the myth of the metal. You ever seen the movie The Watchmen? Read the graphic novel, The Watchmen comic? I see a lot of parallels to Plato's Republic in there, and frankly, I don't agree with the solution they came up with. It's a technocracy, really. They decided that people that run the country, they had a huge criticism of democracy. The muscle mommies. That's a thing right now. Trending. Man, there's so many analogies in this dialogue. They have another analogy called the ship of state for democracy. Kind of saying, like, the way democracy works is just a popularity. They fight over who's going to steer the ship. And somebody will come along and say, like, if you put me in charge of the ship, I'll give you, like, extra food, and we'll go this direction. And, you know, maybe they'll work, and they get to be captain for a little while, and they steer the ship this way. Then somebody, like, if that pisses a bunch of people off, and then somebody else comes along, I can do it better. I'll steer the ship this way. I'll give you guys all this stuff, you know. I'll give you, like, you don't have to go to sleep as early. You can stay up an extra hour or whatever, you know. And it's just this, like, contest of dumb shit all the time and lying to each other, which is pretty accurate, actually. But so they said also the ship, in the meantime, is going, like, zigzag all over. There's no, like, clear direction or path. Where the people who really study the art of celestial navigation and they know how to drive a ship, they're ignored. Patched, and that was the whole, like, thing that happened in the U.S. with the post-war ivory tower intellectual, or Wilson, only president to have a PhD. After that was, like, part of how they guys are just at their head in the clouds. So they were observing this back in, you know, they thought that those people should be in charge, and that was who the gold class was, the philosopher king. But this system they came up with is very non-democratic. I've thought a lot about it, right? Especially being in the military, you know, you take an oath. I have, like, tons of other criticisms about the military industrial complex and everything. Hey, hold on, let me, yeah, I got some, like, noise gating on. Let me, I can just turn this off. Maybe that'll work better. All right. How about now? Is that better? Might need to turn this fan off too, because without the noise gating, you probably hear the background noise. Yeah, give me one sec. Alright, noise gate is off. I still hear some kind of background noise, but whatever. Better than not being able to hear me, I guess. Alright, so where were we? Or what did y'all get out of that? Should I redo the whole thing, or should we just carry on? Because I really want to hear from you guys. I'm just trying to give a little primer on the conversation, but well, where I was getting to was that they come up with this technocratic form of government with these philosopher king people in charge, and they're super critical of democracy. And you got to think too, they were in a city state, and some of this stuff wasn't that crazy to them. The whole like orgies thing and like that stuff seems pretty wild by today's standards, but that was not like a weird thing back then, like pretty much everybody was doing it. So yeah, it seems pretty outlandish, but I know I brought up Watchmen too. I don't know if y'all caught that, but I don't want to spoil it for you if you haven't seen it either. But, I think that movie is pretty critical of what they decided in Plato's Democracy also. Because at the end, they're basically advocating in the same way that Socrates was advocating lying to the people and like feeding them this myth, this story of like your soul is infused with this metal and that means you should be a carpenter. And just don't question it. Just go with that. Listen to us. They called it the noble lie even. They said it's a lie, but it's for their own good. So, it makes everything run better. We know better than you guys, so just go with it. But I don't think it's a spoiler. It's not that big of a spoiler. At the end, they find the Rorschach's journal at the end of Watchmen. So it's like the people, they're not stupid. They'll figure it out eventually. And I think that's even more the case today. It always trips me out. Even sometimes like some hardcore libertarian right-wing type folks who really are like all about freedom and patriotism and democracy. When I bring up stuff about the Electoral College sometimes and just some of these like non-democratic things about the way our government is in the United States, even was in its inception, they get very defensive about it, especially the constitutionalist folks, But I guess we could retread that real quick. So like tyranny of the majority, right? Tyranny of the majority is another criticism of democracy. It's similar to what Plato was saying with the ship of state and everything. Tyranny of the majority is the idea that it really comes from John Locke and Edmund Burke, really. In its like most modern form, I guess. Because John Locke is the guy that the United States government is based off of, his philosophy. He's like a treatise on government. They pretty much took his setup and changed a few things, and that's what the United States government is. He had 3 branches of government, all that. He had a major critic, one of his contemporaries at the time, this guy Edmund Burke. He was a British conservative. I mean, both of them were British. He was a conservative monarchist. He was in favor of the king and anti-democracy. So his main criticism of John Locke's democracy theory was that if you give power to the majority, then they can use that to basically tyrannize, to abuse, and they could even like genocide a minority, and there's nothing that anybody could do about it. Whereas like with the king, if the king's like stepping out of line, they can always depose the king or whatever. I mean, maybe easier said than done, but at least you know who to blame. With a democracy, there's no one person you can point the finger at and hold accountable. So they took this into account when they did the Electoral College and the Representative Republic and all that. John Locke even, did some of that stuff in response to this guy. But the thing is, like, back then, the number of people who could actually participate in government was super limited. Women couldn't vote. Most people couldn't vote unless you owned land. So when people talk about that as like we're protecting minorities, it brings up the question to me, like, what minorities really? What who were they trying to protect? Like, were they trying to protect women, or like ethnic minorities, because I mean they had slaves and stuff. So I mean maybe you could maybe interpret it that way. Maybe like religious minorities, but at the same time, like, what about themselves? Like they're a minority, right? Like the rich landowner, the wealthy landowner is also a minority. And a lot of the stuff they did, and it wasn't like they even agreed about all that stuff, right? You know, like Thomas Jefferson was super critical and outspoken about the central banking stuff and what Alexander Hamilton was doing and not letting rich people take over the government, basically. So yeah, they didn't agree about a lot. And the way that they made the Constitution was super not democratic either. So from the beginning, they were already kind of undermining it. But like, to me, what those kind of things, the assumption there in the Plato stuff, in the electoral college stuff, the representative republic stuff, there's this kind of unspoken assumption that we're just like not capable of self-governing. You know, it's like democracy doesn't get a chance to work because it's never even been tried, really. And I think it works pretty well in small groups. Like, if people do it in small groups a lot. Like, I've seen it happen. You know, I know there's like maybe some stuff to be said about, you know, like subtle influences and power bases and all that, but I think it's important to the conversation we're going to have about how to start an ideal community, even if we're talking about a small community. Because for me, the way I envision it working best is like that, you know, where everybody has a say, you know, and nobody gets to pull a trump card and be like, no, we're not doing that. So I guess my question is like how to make that work, you know. But really what I wanted to talk about tonight with you guys is, I always do this, dude. I put like a script together and then I just start, you know, firing stuff off out onto YouTube server. It's probably going to outlast humanity there. Yeah. Okay, so like I said in the beginning before most everybody showed up, I've been talking a long time about building a regenerative agriculture ranch, a sustainable ranch, and getting some land. There's a lot of things that led up to it. One of them is I read Mickey Singer's book, The Surrender Experiment, and his path to starting his spiritual center out in Jupiter, Florida, I think. You know, and just all kinds of other things, environmental stuff, sustainable agriculture, and just, I've always been really drawn to this idea of freedom. And like, everybody wants that, right? Like, everybody talks about financial freedom all the time, and like breaking free from the system and like exiting the rat race and all that. And I've always wanted to do that, but it got to a point where it felt like most everybody's just trying to get to a point where they're good. And it's like this we've talked about this a lot on the stream, about like this age of individualism that we've been in for a while, and that we're kind of like the pendulum swings back and forth from individual focus to community focus, you know, on an individual level, but also a social level. It's a spiral dynamics thing. But it feels like we're kind of shifting back collectively towards more community focus, you know, at least in some groups of people. I think that there's a big group of people who has been of that mind for a while, but, you know, it's kind of, it's like percentages of people. It's like blocks of society, and I think probably, as I read about all this stuff a lot, like the political theory and the integral politics and everything, and how they kind of categorize everybody. One guy I've been getting into a lot recently is actually this guy Steve McIntosh, and he simplifies it really easily. Spiral Dynamics has maybe 15 categories of development that's like based a lot on psychology, childhood development, and everything. But then they kind of export that to humanity as a whole. But Steve McIntosh simplifies it very well by just saying, you have traditionalist, you have modernist, and then you have postmodernist. And now this smaller, tiny emerging group is developmentalist, or a more holistic thought that includes all of these. So traditionalist is kind of like religious communities like the Amish or something like that. It's usually religion based, because prior to modernity, society was, the rules and the social norms and everything was usually governed by your religious belief. So you see a lot of that. There's even, like the rad trad, that whole trend in Catholic. It started in Catholic. Not all of them maybe are Catholic, but, some of them are. There's pitfalls to all this stuff, right? Those groups tend to be super exclusive. Sometimes they're even xenophobic, racist, and those kind of things. But there's pros to it too, because their communities are really strong, and they don't fall victim to a lot of the bigger society, like technological pitfalls and all that stuff. And then modernism is where most people are. Steve himself says about 50% of society in America is in that worldview. That's, the world that we were all born into, capitalism and, business and the American dream, and go to school, get a good job so you can start a family and do all that. That's the modernist view, that kind of post-World War II, the romanticization of that era. That was peak modernism. Postmodernism showed up big socially in the 60s. So in America, it was the hippie counterculture movement. In philosophy in France, at the same time, in the 60s, was the actual postmodernist philosophy movement. Like Derrida and Foucault and Deleuze, those guys, all those guys, Jameson. But their thing was kind of attacking modernism and, some of the, not just the structural stuff, but that was a big part of it, the structural stuff, but the underpinnings of it, like the philosophical assumptions behind liberal democracy and what makes everybody embrace individualism so much. So that was a big shift back towards community mindedness and kind of trying to embrace the whole world in this concept of inclusion and community. The global village is basically postmodernism. But there's pitfalls to all these things, right? So the main pitfall of postmodernism is not just how anti-modernism and anti-traditionalism it is. They talk about this a lot in Spiral Dynamics, how traditionalists don't like modernists or postmodernists. Modernists don't like traditionalists or postmodernists. And postmodernists don't like modernists or traditionalists. So it's we're just fight about no, I'm right and you're wrong. And that's our whole project here too, is how do we have a conversation? Because there's some things that they're right about. That, there's some things traditionalists are right about. There's some things modernists are right about. There's some things postmodernists are right about. Not all of them are all wrong about everything. They're all wrong about some things, just like all of us are. So how do we get to the point where we can talk about it? And that's what the developmentalism is about. That's Steve's word for it. Other people have Ken Wilber's is integral theory. Most people call it that. Some people call it holism. It's all the same thing. So, anyways, given all that stuff, how do we start if we were going to do it right now? You know, you and me and a bunch of our friends, we got some land and we're going to start like our own thing. What would it be like? How, like, where would we start and what would we need and how would we do it? What do you guys think? Like, is it even possible, or is it just like a pipe dream? It's crazy because I mean, I've seen people do it. I mean, never like that, really. You know, I mean, I've never like lived in a commune or anything. I'm sure there's people doing it, but I've seen people like with real community and like approaching some kind of real freedom. You know, like they're very liberated in who they are and the way that they live life and everything, and they have community around them that reflects that. But there's still like these pressures and limitations imposed by, you know, having to work and having to support yourself financially, and those just pre-existing pressures that we were all born into. I think so too, man. I think I feel it like deep in my soul, dude. Not only that it's possible, but that, you know, that we're gonna do it. Like I said, I'm sure there's people doing it already. I just maybe haven't come across them yet, but yeah, that's a really good point. Man, I went out last Friday. Yeah, I got you to survive, yeah. I went out last Friday with a friend of mine, Nick, and he recently just quit his executive position at a nonprofit that he was working for, to be a life coach. You know, and I'm sure he's not making as much money. But what's up, Lou? I'm sure he's not making as much money now, but he did it in pursuit of his dream, and that's his whole coaching program, is about following your dream and like living your big dream. But anyways, we all went out. Like, I went over. They were just having this cozy little get together thing. It was one of the group's birthday. I think his birthday's actually today. I just met her Friday, so happy birthday to her. Her name's Mel. But I was really surprised by like how their group had like a family vibe. It was great. I mean, classic Ocean Beach, California vibe too, you know, but it was mostly women. I think there were me, Nick, and at the start it was 4 guys. No, 5 guys. 5 guys, burgers. But we lost a few. By the end of the night, it was just me and Nick and like 6 women. But I was like, how they were with each other. I was just like very present to what you were saying, LeVar. It's like that, you know, because I don't think we've ever really had that. Maybe some of the 60s hippies groups did, but I don't know if we've ever had that where like women were fully empowered and equal in the community building, since like tribal. I don't know. But yeah, I was really present to that, like the power and the need for that. So thanks for bringing that up, because that's something that I just, you know, was like very viscerally in my space. Just this last Friday. So Lou, we were talking about if you and me and everybody else and, you know, some friends, we got some land and we started a ranch and we wanted to start a community. what it would be like and how we could do it. And how we could do it, not just like how we could pay for it or whatever, but how we could, make it work, better than whatever we're doing right now. Really I'm thinking about like a space, a real place, like where everybody can feel, safe for one thing, but honored and included and appreciated and part of the community. And we've talked about this a few times too, like these pressures kind of through history on like the disintegrated real community. Like the disappearance of third spaces and like the commodification of everything, and everybody's charging like just access denial to certain people. But I know I've brought this up with the evolution of consciousness stuff and some of the philosophy stuff, like Gene Gebser and everything, that we've talked about how the like moving into agrarian society broke up community. Because if you're in like survival tribes, you guys take care of each other like you're, fighting for life and death, because you are. So you share everything and you guys know everything about each other. It's very intimate as a group. Like the community and the family are very enmeshed. And moving to agrarian is more like shifting towards family. And I think even what a lot of people romanticize about the nuclear family didn't even exist in the beginning of that. It wasn't until Industrial Revolution and the father like got taken out of the home to go work in a factory or somewhere remotely. Because, in farm life, like everybody's there in the farmhouse and like helping out, and you see each other every day still. So the father's like super involved in parenting. But when the father gets taken out of home, that's like the more classic, not classic, but that's the nuclear family they all talk about. But that's already like degrees separated from our original concept of community. And now it's even more complicated. So like both parents are pretty much working all the time now, and work has even like crept into your personal time. So like a lot of people are doing side businesses, and there's just a lot of economic pressure. A lot of people attribute it the threat to the family sheerly to like religious values and stuff. And I'm not saying that's not part of it. Like there's degradation of all of that stuff. Like we were saying, in the traditionalist communities, they have more of that, and they're very religious. So I can see why people go towards that, but with the social and economic pressures, I think that's like the main driving factor that screws up the family situation. It's just like it's really hard to parent kids when you're like worried about work and money all the time. Yeah, I can't tell you just how many people I've seen just stressed out, like, so especially dads, especially dudes, like just, and I'm not limiting it to only to them, but primary breadwinners, I guess. Just people who work long hours, people who work a lot, and then they get their few hours of discretionary time before they go to bed, like, are usually so exhausted that they don't even have the capacity to spend quality time with their kids. And like the kids notice that. It's just how do we reclaim that original sense of community? Great books about that are 1 Second After and The Patriot, kind of religious, we can read around. The Patriot, that's not the Mel Gibson movie, right? More so, capitalism has always been the fall of the household. The need for more instead of being okay with the basic solution. Yeah, I'm with that. I'm super with that. I guess I could just say, like, to move us in that direction of talking about how we could possibly do this, like, however we started it out, like pooling resources or whatever to buy the land. I think it's real important that it goes into like some kind of collective ownership, like some kind of trust, and that because then you always have that kind of you have that in your back pocket. It like upsets it causes like a weird. Well, everybody knows it's this guy's land, so we don't want to do anything that might get us like kicked out. Even if it's real subtle, I think like that's a big part of it is we have to be aware and also like emotionally aware and transparent about all that kind of stuff. Early when I met my girlfriend, right after she had got divorced, she was kind of struggling financially, and she was like, "Man, I wish you had a lot of money, because then you could just fix all this stuff." I was like, "Yeah, I wish too, but but I'm kind of glad that that's not the case, because I would rather be with somebody that wants to be with me. I don't want any kind of codependency, weird, like, even if I'm a nice guy and I really wanted to help. Like, I feel like it sets up kind of a weird dynamic where it's like I feel like that when people are, give me stuff. I feel like, I gotta like reciprocate or whatever. Or, if you're dependent on it, especially if you're dependent on it, it's like, even if they just say don't worry about it, it's like you're probably more hesitant to set boundaries and like stand up for yourself and potentially like threaten whatever you're dependent on. Yeah, I love that. I love that. When did it become like that? Because this reminds me, there's this woman named Trisha Hersey. She has some social media stuff called the Nap Ministry. And she's always talking about that. She's talking about like how capitalism and hustle grind culture is like destroying your humanity and stealing your like divine. I think she's like she went to seminary and everything. She's actually like she's like a minister, but she says it's stealing like your divine right to rest and just to like be human, and like for that to be okay. It's not like that you're lazy. It's like this work hustle grind mentality is putting feelings of worthlessness in people when they're not doing something productive. It's like this mechanical focus on productivity. And I think that ties really well into the whole like modernity conversation, that worldview. That's one of the pitfalls of modernity. It's very like scientific, robotic, like logic, process based, where it's, if it's not like of some kind of physical world value, then it's bullshit. You know what I mean? So that like devalues pretty much the entire human experience. But yeah, I think that is when it happened. Like, it happened gradually, but it happened in modernity. Have the land owned by an organization that includes housing and pays people for work done in excess of what the organization safely needs to function. What do you mean, Lou? Have the land owned by an organization that includes housing and pays people for work done in excess of what the organization safely needs to function. So, like, you get overtime? I was really hoping for something like post money. Like, we don't need money. Or, I mean, maybe we have it, because we have to interact with the rest of the world, but We use it for the good for everybody in the community, and we manage the funds like democratically or whatever. Because like the kind of the classic concept of communal living is like, okay, we're gonna be growing stuff, right? I mean, we need that to feed ourselves, but yeah, for sure. Um, yeah, I was imagining like the organization is us, though. You know what I mean? Like we are the trust. The Everybody who lives there is part of the trust. I know it's a lot, bro. Um, how'd your paper go, by the way? Was it anything related? We're gonna have to catch up on that later, man. Yeah, like when I imagine this stuff, I'm like, okay, this is basically what these people were doing in the '60s. They butted into all these like governance problems and everything too. And a lot of times they ended up kind of back in the place where they started. There's this let me see if I can pull that up. There's I think it's the guy who wrote. Wait, is it this? Yeah. I think it's the guy who wrote Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance. He has this quote. Let me get all this stuff out of the way. About maybe it'll just be here. Yeah, this one right here. To tear down a factory or revolt against a government or avoid repair of a motorcycle because it is a system is to attack effects rather than causes. And as long as the attack is upon the effects only, no change is possible. The true system, the real system, is present in our construction of systematic thought itself, rationality itself. And if a factory is torn down but the rationality which produced it is left standing, then that rationality will simply produce another factory. If a revolution destroys a systematic government but the systematic patterns of thought that produced the government are left intact, then those patterns will repeat themselves in the succeeding government. There's so much to talk about the system and so little understanding. I feel like that's oh yeah. Medium on Tuesday with Maury. I think I read that book. I know I have that book. Realization of the land belongs to no one person. Teaching empathy. Yeah. For sure. That's what I'm saying. Yeah, like I feel like that's part of the root of the issue, right? Is the whole like individual claim ownership stuff. Yeah, maybe it was so long ago I just don't remember it, Lou. I'm gonna have to look. I know I have it on my bookshelf in my garage. It's like Mitch Ablom, right? Maybe. But yeah, I think that like that was a problem with those people in the '60s that were trying to do that shit. Is they were still, even though they're kind of like at the beginnings of postmodernism, I would still say that. So the way Gene Gebser talks about it, right? The evolution of consciousness stuff, which is what the author that wrote that book, Robert Pirsig, was talking about. That was Einstein's got a quote about it too, like the. Oh, thanks, dude. That thing is so loud, bro. Was Einstein says something about that too, like basically like you can't solve the problems at the level of thinking that created the problems, something along those lines. But the way Gene Gebser frames like this whole kind of long-term, big picture evolution. Like he talks about the emergence of human consciousness in the first place, and then how it evolved over time and changed. And he identifies some kind of phases that it went through. He calls them structures of consciousness. And it's kind of the concept that human consciousness emerged from animal consciousness. Are you laughing at the noise? And there's some interesting kind of stuff that he doesn't talk about, like Helen Keller's book, where she talks about her experience of consciousness prior to acquiring language. And there's a lot of stuff with the deaf community, and they're like about sign language and the evolution of emergence and evolution of sign language and everything. Is really interesting insights into like the impact of language on consciousness and abstract thought. And it kind of makes sense that the level of ability, your capacity to be aware of yourself and the world, it is reflected in your ability to think abstractly in language. So like the more abstract the language can get, the more abstract your thought can get, and then you can keep kind of stepping back and like considering the bigger picture. And it's funny because it's one of my favorite quotes in philosophy is this guy Feigl, who's part of this philosophical school that I don't agree with, like not even one bit. But he has this really funny quote about basically all this whole shit that we've been doing all along. And he says, philosophy is the disease of which it ought to be the cure. So basically it tries to solve these problems, and it creates a bunch of more problems, and then it tries to solve those problems and creates more problems. And I would say the same thing about civilization too. Who was it? Jared Diamond, the historian, that said that, I think it was him, that said that agriculture was like the biggest wrong turn we ever took, because before then we were working like maybe, I don't know, 4 or 5 hours a day at most. And then we go to working from not only just working from sun up to sundown, but then, living all close together. Now we have all this disease and like sanitation issues and all these other problems we got to solve. And, ever since then, we just haven't been able to get it right. But I think it's interesting because it's this process of like, we just keep taking a step back and like looking at the bigger picture and trying to make it work better. So that's kind of the process that Gebser identifies. But he says, and he uses all kinds of stuff like literature, art stuff, philosophy stuff, everything. He references everything to kind of show like this is where humans were at in this time period. And so the next structure after basically archaic animalistic thinking was, he calls it the magical worldview or structure. And then after that it was the mythic. And then after that was the mental. So the mental is basically rational thought. Not saying there was like no elements of that at all in mythic, but it was more about like cyclical time and these kind of powers that controlled everything. And one of the big problems that humans have always been responding to is trying to control and dominate nature and like threats from Mother Nature. And in doing that, like they separated themselves from nature. And even like some of these references in religion and religious traditions and even pre-monotheism, like these Jovian archetype deities that are like transcendent in heaven and they're like outside of nature. That's what all the monotheistic deities are now. It's like an attempt to kind of get humans above nature, And we did that in a lot of ways. Like we broke out of a lot of these cycles, like the day-night cycle, the sleep cycle. But it caused all these problems again. Yeah. Hey, Tiffany. It shows that we care. Most people really do want to do good and be good. I believe that too, Mallory. I believe that too. Even people like, I thought about that a lot with like the worst people. The worst people that you can think of. I wonder about that. Like, it's easy to just kind of like, oh, there's something wrong with them, They were born without like the connection between their prefrontal cortex and their amygdala or whatever. They, like, we just got to get rid of those people. But it's funny because even with like the whole psychopath explanation, it's like most of those people, not all of them, but most of them were like seriously abused growing up, So it's like, I think to me, as a non-expert, to me it seems more like shame-oriented, It's like people don't have the freedom to be honest about who they are and what they feel and, talk about those things in a healthy way. And I think that pushes some people into some really dark places. I know it has for me, not into like, like nothing like that, but, as far as like depression and self-harm stuff, for sure. But yeah, I agree with that. I feel like if we don't give people that benefit of the doubt, it's like there's definitely no way that it can work, especially in something like what we're talking about right now, like having a small community. Jared Diamond, we trade living free for social acceptance, and our society has designed our systems to bring up children who can live for the system instead of the joy. Yes, exactly. Yeah. Separating ourselves from nature, yeah. Yeah. So some of this stuff exists in postmodernism. I mean, not like super explicitly in any of these French guys, but just I think in that whole world, there's a lot of, especially because look, there's the environmental movement is like a postmodernist movement. So I think there's some like desire to reconnect with nature in postmodernism, and this like criticism of modernism for moving, like that's it's a very like postmodern worldview statement to make, that like modernism and separating ourselves from nature in that way was where we really went wrong. Because what I was saying earlier is like you could consider that traditionalism or pre-enlightenment, pre-renaissance. This what Gene Gebser calls the mythical structure of consciousness. Most people were operating in that consciousness structure where it was very cyclical, time-oriented, and cycle-based. Even all the religious observances and so a lot of the stuff we still do is based on that. Like these rituals and ceremonies, a lot of them were even carried from the magical era, were a lot of times directed on like keeping the cycle going. And it's like the cycle that sustains us. It was very, very kind of like yin yang. But the shift into like super logical thinking and the mental structure is more based in this idea of progress and linear time and like getting better over time. And I was going to say earlier, like I think postmodernism is still, and this is why I even tried to start explaining Gebser. It's a lot to explain. We could do like 17 live streams on the Gene Gebser stuff and still not really get like as deep into it as he does. But what he calls the mental structure, I would say the postmodern worldview is still like squarely inside of that structure of thinking. That's like very logical and very, it's like this view of the world as like a giant machine kind of, where it's like you have these atoms and little parts that are, it's like these little BBs and deterministic. It's very deterministic. and like everything can be reduced down to its parts through science. That whole worldview. I feel like a lot of postmodernist thinkers are still in that worldview. And that's kind of what I was saying with the Robert Pirsig quote, is that the reason a lot of these folks because they were at the very emergence of that socially, in the hippie 60 communes and stuff, why they basically recreated capitalism over again in some ways, or they ran up into some of these same problems, is because they hadn't progressed into the new worldview, which Gene Gebser calls the integral. And Ken Wilber stole that, and he calls his integral. Steve McIntosh, like I mentioned earlier, he calls it developmentalist. I call it holist, but could it be society a step so far away from simplicity? Yeah, I think so. I think that's not that I agree like complete with this guy either, but Jean-Jacques Rousseau talked about this a lot. A lot of people call him like the originator of social contract theory, because he wrote his book was it was called The Social Contract, right? But I don't think because that's like basically what liberal democracy is. It's like it's similar even to the science part. Like everything's made up of atoms. This is a view that society's made up of individual people, and we're like the atoms that build the cells and the organs and all that stuff of society. So it's very individual focused. Just fighting our natural state, blah, blah, blah. We're also not supposed to know what's going on around the world. Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's a good point, because before people knew that, it was easier to just, feed them bullshit and keep them in the dark. Now people can look at the big picture easier, more people than ever. And there's, just a ton of more people than ever before. Right, yeah. Yeah, that's really what I'm like trying to think about, Mallory. Is like how can we keep the good and get rid of the bad, basically? Of all these things. Because there are good things about traditional, like the Amish, there's a lot of good things that they're doing. Their communities, and like the taking care of their kids and the way they raise their families and that kind of stuff. They really look out for each other and teach each other like some great skills. They're like deadlifting barns and shit. But on the other hand, there's some really like oppressive things that they're doing. And then modernity, I think we're pretty much all on the same page with the pitfalls of that. But what I think a lot of people who are kind of in this, let's make something better space are still, and myself included, I'm pretty attached to a lot of the postmodernist thought. I've been in that world so long, and well, what do they call it? I even started, I wrote an outline for an article on this recently, and I'm working on it right now. It's Karl Popper had this thing called the paradox of tolerance. Maybe I can pull it up. It might be easier if I just pull something up for it. But paradox of tolerance is basically the idea. It's like, how do you tolerate intolerant people? Yeah. I love that. It's like that Eastern spirituality. Okay, so if a society's practice of tolerance includes the intolerant, then intolerance will dominate, eliminating both the tolerant and the practice of tolerance. So how do you solve that problem? And I think that is the problem of postmodernism, because they're not even really trying to solve that problem. They kind of just like violence. Just get rid of them. That's what we were talking about earlier. I feel like this is like, it's one of those like logic puzzles. You know, it's like Zeno's paradox type thing. But it can unravel itself in reality. It's only like a thought problem, right? Because this is what happens, right, with in the postmodernist worldview. And maybe I can even pull up Steve's thing. Maybe I need to put it here. I think it's here. I think he talks about it a little bit here. This is like a really great, I love this because it's so short and easy to everything going on outside of us shouldn't have control or influence of our state of being. Most are so disconnected. Yeah, that's a good point, Richard. It is easy to get like thrown off about. You know, I've had that a lot, man. Even in meditation and like the love and kindness meditation and those kind of things, like I get overwhelmed sometimes with like the suffering that's in the world, and you know, it's a lot, especially because we can look out and see it now. And, you know, I've been places too, like I've in the Navy. I've been to places where there was extreme poverty, and I've seen, you know, some people just like suffering terribly with, you know, they have all kinds of medical problems and food insecurity problems, and you know, I've like talked with some of these people, and they're like, all of them that I've met were super generous, kind, inclusive people, and I don't know, man. It just, my heart goes out to them, you know. And yeah, I think there's like, that's a whole nother like rabbit hole I guess we could go down with the whole like empathy and boundary setting stuff. But yeah, that can definitely you know, knock you off, right? We need to learn love, compassion, understanding, and forgiveness of self and others, for sure. Yeah, you're right, Patrick, dude. It does. Social media will show it straight to you. It is a lot, but why take on their suffering and make it yours? How is one to find solutions if you're... Right, yeah. If you're like crushed under the weight of it, you know, and you're incapacitating yourself, it's like you're not... you're basically just adding to the suffering. You know, you're not you're making things worse, not better. Yeah, that's a good point, man. Okay, so we were talking about postmodernism, like the kind of paradox of tolerance and the how it kind of shoots itself in the foot sometimes. I don't know if he says it exactly here, but environmentalism, diversity, inclusion, social justice, progressive values provide a new level of care that can help America become a more moral society. Anti-modernism, reverse patriotism, divisive identity politics, self-righteous scolding. I think this is not like a great explanation of it, but this is kind of touching on what I was trying to get at. I mean, this too, like, it's very like process based and like growth based. So it's like up to us to grow the new way, like grow in the new direction we want to go, and it can't just, you know. There are a lot of people who's like violent revolution now, and I get it. You know, I get it. I get that, especially in the face of some of this stuff. Like if we don't do something about the environment, like so many people are going to get the world, we're going to be in Mad Max in 5 years or whatever. Sometimes it leads to alarmism and those things, but Mark Fisher talks about this a lot too. This part, the shift from class consciousness to identity issues, and this like moralist element, which is funny because I've said it for a long time that a lot of people on the postmodernist end, and then a lot of people on the traditionalist end, they're very moralistic about different things. One is religion based and goes by, usually in America it's Christianity, but the other is very like about health and purity and environmental justice and those kind of things. But it's like essentially it's the same kind of approach. It's like if you don't do this, you're a bad person and you deserve punishment. So like it applies to the paradox of tolerance stuff by like how do you tolerate the intolerant, right? And I think the answer is in here in developmentalism. Spiral dynamics has the same thing, but it's basically saying that like the conversation has to change. Instead of like focusing on these people are wrong, these people are wrong, these people are wrong, and arguing about who's right and wrong, taking an approach of trying to look for what everybody is caring about. Because we were all kind of born into this worldview, but in the spiral dynamics explanation of all this, at some point in your emotional development as a human, you go through a stage of being like highly individualistic, even if it's as a child. But eventually you come back to focus on the family more. And then you come back to focusing on, like everybody has their like rebellious teenager phase, where you're seeking like some kind of independence and, individual strength and like, and it fluctuates in that way. And what they're saying is that this happens in societies too. And it's been happening through humanity forever on the social level. But how am I defining intolerance? So intolerance is basically just as simple as what you probably think the definition means, like somebody else is wrong and they don't deserve to have a seat at the table. They don't deserve to have their voice be heard because what they're saying is like dangerous or stupid or misinformed or whatever. Open curiosity about what drives. Yes. Yeah, exactly, Tiffany. Yeah. My friend Nick, he likes to call it non-judgmental awareness. I just like to call it like what you said, curiosity. Just being curious about who is deciding who is intolerant. Well, I mean, in your case, it would be you. In my case, it would be me. And then we like seek out agreement from other people, and we're like, okay, this person's cool because they agree with me about, we should get rid of global warming and we should support, electric vehicles. But this guy says we should have gas vehicles, so they're on the other team. Like kind of forming these, whatever. It could be on whatever. I think in the case of postmodernism, what we're talking about, the intolerance in postmodernism is around this stuff. It's like if you don't support this stuff, then you're out. You're not one of us. But the thing that's weird about it is like none of these other ones necessarily claim this. They don't claim to be inclusive. The weird thing about postmodernist progressivism is that it claims to be radically inclusive, but at the same time, it's not. It can't include anybody who's not inclusive. You know what I mean? So if you're not an inclusive person, I don't like you. And you have it all wrong, and you're the problem, and you're the one who's screwing up the world. Right? Right, yeah. Not having stuff in common. Right. Like, so all of these worldviews are exclusive of each other. At least they think they are, even though they share some similarities sometimes. Like I was saying, these guys and these guys especially, because they're more community focused. These guys are just like, just do whatever. Do whatever you want. Like, if you didn't become a millionaire, it's your fault because you didn't work hard. But what developmentalism is trying to do, what integral politics is trying to do, is look at, where are all these people coming from? Maybe you're in this worldview because of, your upbringing, or, you just never progressed beyond that point, right? I think most people in the U.S. are born into this way of thinking. And one of the things that's interesting and different about Steve McIntosh, the guy who made this website, and is a co-founder of this whole movement, one of the interesting insights that he likes to talk about is that because we've so much abandoned traditionalism, that we don't have like a solid foundation for this to work or for this to work. Right? So what we're talking about to work, like basically we're trying to start a community, like I was saying what the hippies did. We're trying to start a community, but we're a bunch of highly individual minded, like scientific minded people. So that doesn't work. Like we need what these traditionalists have to make a community work. Yeah. Right, yeah. Yeah, I love that, Richard. I think I really feel that curiosity is a big piece of the answer here. And the solution to the paradox, right? Because if I can really try to get into somebody's world, instead of indoctrinated mindset of teaching individualism. Right, yeah. I think, probably Tiffany would have some insight on this because she it deals with this on a daily basis, like the childhood education stuff. But I think part of our community, and you guys please tell me like what you think about this, because like I said, this is not just me like saying this is how it should be, because I don't know any better than any of you. But what I imagine is part of this community is us developing a kind of cradle to grave childhood education system, that includes all of this stuff, that's instead of focused on like having kids conform to like one certain worldview and tell them this is the way and this is how it's always going to be done, to kind of lead them into this growth mindset and the awareness stuff too, the curiosity stuff too, and like have these kind of cultural social norms be like a huge part of the way that we live, to where they get to this point eventually, and they'll probably even go beyond where we're capable of going, because like we were saying in the very beginning, this whole thing's like an evolving process. And kind of, I write these like crazy fiction stories, and so I try to imagine like all these different ways it could go. And other people have done a lot of the same. Other sci-fi writers and stuff. I don't think I'm like breaking new ground necessarily, but one of the ways that I see it potentially going, if we continue on like the modernist path, is that we just turn into robots. We kind of just destroy our free will and turn into some kind of like hyperlinked imitation of humanity, like a weird mangling of humanity into like a computer wannabe consciousness, like whatever best attempt we can make at it, that we like neural netted ourselves into. Hope this isn't too strange of a thought. Well, I was just talking about some crazy shit, so. What sort of communities in the animal kingdom have some of the best systems that we could actually draw from? That's interesting. The first thing I thought of was bonobos. I mean, they're like a matriarchal primate. But I don't know. I mean, I don't know. Can they? I mean, they can probably give us some insight, but I don't know if like modeling straight from them is the way. Yeah. What do you think, Richard? I heard Robert Sapolsky a while back talking about this story about studying baboon troops and how one of the troops that was neighboring one of the ones that he was studying through this long, like, convoluted process of, eating human garbage, basically. All the, they had to go into some other tribal territory to get the food. So they got, like, the biggest, toughest, like, most aggro, like, shitty alpha male guys to go do it. And they ate all the best food first, which was, like, the animal parts, and it had tuberculosis, and they all died. So, like, all the asshole guys died. And after that, like, the women, the females there kind of started gatekeeping. Like, they didn't let, like, asshole guys in, because they leave their troop when they're juveniles and they go try to find a new one. So if some guy came in and he was, like, being a jerk, they would kick him out. They would all, like, group up and run him off, the males and females. So they developed, like, a different culture of less how baboons, I don't know if you know how baboons are, but they're pretty fucking violent and terrible to each other. So they kind of, that's what we were saying in the beginning. That's what you were saying, right, Lavaris? You were saying, like, we were talking about the influence of women and, like, that whole thing. I think that's an interesting consideration too. Bees. Yeah, ants and bees and insects are cool too. Like, that kind of reminds me a lot of what I was just talking about. I think that's the way we're going, basically. If we robot ourselves, if we turn into the Borg or whatever, we're gonna turn into, like, a human cyborg beehive. Which, I don't know, man. Maybe it wouldn't be. If something like that happens, I guess that's the way the universe unfolds. But, I'm hoping not. Yeah, elephants. Yeah. So what do y'all think about the, starting a place? How, I mean, even like with what we're talking about, like, how could we implement some of that stuff, like the bonobo stuff or the elephant stuff? Yeah, if we could just Men in Black everybody and go back to ancestor life. Yeah, that's what I'm saying, man. Like, I think you weren't here. Lavaris brought up earlier, like, I was telling her, like, it's amazing, and I was telling Tiffany too. I messaged her about it earlier. That last Friday I went out with my friend Nick, and their group of friends is like a little family, and it was just such a cool vibe. Like, and it was really all these women that were there. At the end of the night, it was me and Nick and, like, 6 women, and they were so, like, I don't know, man. They took care of each other so well, like, I don't know how to exactly explain it, but it was just such a vibe, and I was like, dude, like with this is so important that like this needs to be. It was kind of like, I mean, we were hanging out and having fun, but it's like it's kind of like we were there, like hanging out with them while they were having fun or whatever. I don't know. Yeah. Oh yeah, Lou. This is all just you know, throwing shit to the wall, man. Seeing what sticks. We're not trying to throw money down on it right now. At the end of this, all right, everybody. I thought about that too, though, Lou. Like I have some like, there's a lot of fear and like I don't know, man. Like that could go really wrong. And I've thought about like what could be a way to do that. Like maybe I could, maybe there we could like segment part of it, for like for community, and then have like a separate part that's I don't know. But you're right, man. There's a lot of potential for things to go sideways or for outside people to exploit that. Unfortunately, a lot of toxic males raise more toxic males, hinders women from having a seat at the table because it's so driven with the paternal being the almighty. Yeah, I hear you, Monique. That's that red-pilled shit. None of that. We don't tolerate that in our community. I feel like that Monique, I feel like that goes into like what we were talking about a minute ago too, though, about like the dissolution of the family and everything. Like the not like the nuclear family that the conservatives talk about all the time, like the real family, like pre-agrarian family and community, like real community and real family. Because if parents are parenting and the community is also involved in supporting each other in parenting, there's this Kurt Vonnegut quote I like to bring up all the time. It's he said it in a bunch of his speeches. I feel like he just reused the same material. Yeah. Lou knows this one. When a couple has an argument nowadays, they may think it's about money or power or sex or how to raise kids or whatever they're really saying to each other without realizing it is this: you're not enough people. Maybe that's not the one. I mean, that's like related. That's part of the thing he's saying, but what was it? Yeah. Yeah, I don't want to pull up a whole speech and like search for it, but he's basically saying that like, oh yeah, no, I remember now. Let me look it for this. Yeah, this one. This is the one I was thinking of. Husband and wife and some kids is not a family. It's a terribly vulnerable survival unit. I think that, I mean, I totally agree with that, and I've felt that. And a single parent is, oh my Lord, is even worse. But, let me turn this off. But I think it goes into that whole conversation about, the economic pressures on people, and especially like through the individuation process and the focus on individualism. It's so isolating, and what we really need is the tribe. We need community, and they tried to do that in the 60s, and they screwed it up in a bunch of ways. And a lot of these like libertarian tech bros tried to do it with their their tech wealth, and that shit didn't work out either. And I think the problem is the worldview, the individualism worldview, and it is scary to let go of that, and we don't want to just like say that's that's evil and we shouldn't think that way anymore, because I can see the value in it too, like people who have individuated. That's like a Carl Jung term too, right? People who have gone through that process of like individuating fully are very they're more self-reliant and tough and like resilient in a lot of ways. So it's not like we want to get rid of that, but it's maybe just like we don't want to use it for the blueprint for society as a whole. It's like this super Nietzschean society where everybody's like, if you're not full ubermensch, like you suck. And yeah, that's not a great. Obviously, it doesn't work out too well. And it leads to not only like a lot of fighting and competition and whatever, but it also leads to like extreme isolation and mental health problems and all that. So like I think that a lot of these kids, the toxic male, some of the red pill, Jordan Peterson, Andrew Tate, like allure is a lot of these kids, like they grew up without parenting, and for boys that are like born into this kind of paradigm of you gotta be strong and be a primary breadwinner and make a lot of money or else you're like a piece of shit and whatever. Like it's pretty much impossible for them to do that, and I really think that's the reason we have all this like violence and school shootings and that kind of stuff. It's like I don't know if Andrew Tate, like fuck that guy, but I don't know if that whole movement itself is like the problem, Like, what's the root of the problem that's driving that stuff? And like, what I think about a lot is how to remove the pressure on the kids. Because if we put these kids in a community like this, are they going to have that? They won't have that same like pressure to like freak out about not being able to live up to these expectations that are put on them. Because they don't exist. Those expectations cease to exist, I don't know. What do you think about that? Society expects women to govern children, but have not been trusted to govern people. Yeah, it's wild. It's like, it's pretty much the same thing. Like, children are people. The women in my community seem to be the most interested in the work and connection it takes to sustain these type of communities. Yeah. Well, I'm here for it. I'm into it, so I'm with you guys. Girls, ladies, women. Oh, good, because that was a bit of anxiety. Oh, that's funny, Lou. Yeah, man, I'm not asking you to, unless you want to throw some money in the pot, dude. I'm saving up for this, so that's like the main goal eventually, is to buy a place and do this collaboratively, I would hope, but no pressure. Breaking generational programs as we speak. It's going to take time, but it's a possibility for a bright future ahead. More are seeing it. Yeah, bro, dude. Richard, dude, like, you are an inspiration, man, and I see you doing that shit, and we're in this together, bro. I'm doing the same. I've talked with my mom a lot about this, and I think that's just the way it kind of works, man. Like, we see way more than they were able to see. They just didn't have the capacity for it. My mom's like a amazing human, and she has an enormous heart, and I think like a lot of times the problems that we're dealing with are like the problems that we're given, It's just our lot at the time that we're alive. So like, this is our time, man, and we're doing it. And I think we're doing good. I think you're doing great, man, and I applaud you. And like you said, man, bright future ahead, and we can do more. If everyone could come to terms with their trauma and move through them and heal, we could trust each other again. I feel like it's just a bunch of hurt people hurting people. It's a crazy deep hole, and that's why it's hard to commit. For sure, yeah. You know, because it's like all those levels of emotional maturity and progression, everybody's at different stages, you know? And some people are in that stage of just like, fuck everybody else, I'm going to get mine. And like, you know, those people are dangerous. To our mental health. And I think a big part of that is learning how to, you know, especially as somebody leaning into empathy, to have those boundaries and to like protect ourselves and each other from people like that. But also like not to, you know, demonize and like cast those people out. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know, I probably showed it like way too many times on this stream, but I have this quote up here by Martin Luther King Jr. that I feel like is like, you know, it speaks my heart. It's from a speech, a sermon that he gave, I think in Detroit during the civil rights era, obviously. But he says, one day we'll win our freedom, but not only will we win freedom for ourselves, but we will so appeal to your heart and your conscience that we will win you in the process. And our victory will be a double victory. This seems to me the only answer and the only way to make our nation a new nation and our world a new world. Love is the absolute power. Because that's really at the center of all of this whole project that I'm doing with, you know, with the ranch, but with this, you know, political philosophy stuff too, and the developmentalism. And that's where I think my approach to it is a little different than some of the other guys that are doing it. You know, like I it's not that I really disagree with any of them, like Steve McIntosh or Ken Wilber or any of the other people working in integral politics, but I think we're just all kind of saying, like, let's not forget about this piece. Let's not, like, we got to bring this also. And it's funny, we're talking about Socrates and Plato and stuff in the beginning of this, because I feel like that same principle that he's talking about is exemplified in Socrates' approach to dialogue. And I love the part where he says that we will win you in the process. Because I don't know if he explains it in other things that I've read, or I just kind of made it up myself. But to me, what he talks about a lot is like not only liberating ourselves from oppression or from limitations from the government or oppressors or these people that are doing these things and trying to exploit us and take advantage of us and, you know, manipulate us or whatever, but also setting them free. Because, you know, in philosophy, there's something about it in Hegel. He talks about this lord and bondsman relationship, where it's like the dominator forces the subject to do all the work, and as such, the subject is like the creator. He's he or she, whatever, is like the bringer of creation and life, and, you know, the generator of good things. But the dominator wants to be that, so they want to have like the virtue that the person that they're dominating has, and they try to get that through dominating them. And the person who's being dominated wants to be free from the domination. So they a lot of times too in his stuff, you know, like there's an inversion there that happens. It's like a flip, but he talks about like the only resolution to it is like the liberation of both. from each other, from like looking at each other as the other, basically. It's like he kind of kicked off the whole like ball of the othering conversation, which is huge. And I think that's really what Martin Luther King is talking about, like othering the oppressor and making them into the enemy. And it's like, but you're not my enemy. We are human, and we are both like caught in this. The only way to resolve the conflict is to stop fighting, and to like see the humanity of the other. And I think that's really powerful, and I think that has to be like, that has to be like a focal point of our community for it to work, and for like democracy to work, and for the what do we call it, non-judgmental awareness, or the curiosity about what other people are doing or why they're saying what they're saying, where that comes from. It has to come from that place of love and acceptance. And if we lose that, then we're doomed to repeat these same conflicts and cycles of this bullshit. But yeah, you're right. It is a crazy deep hole, and it is difficult. It is, to me, it's the fundamental human problem. We got to break away from attachment from everything and start being connected. Yeah. Oh, wait. Oh, I think my chat went like... Us men have a lot of work to do. Yeah, Richard, dude, I am part of a men's group every Monday, and man, that group is you know what, dude? Maybe you should check out the men's group. You might like it. Like, Lou was in it for a little while. But just like seeing, from my personal experience, man, being in the military and like being a single father and dealing with the challenges of that, I got like zero empathy, pretty much, from these guys. And it led me down this path of like feeling like I had to hide that shit, and like, I started feeling like I don't know, I hated being in that environment where it's like I felt like I wasn't free to be myself, felt very inauthentic. And even with the men's group, I was afraid to really like open up about certain things. It's weird because I'm like an oversharer and whatever. I don't mind telling my like my trauma stories and stuff, and I feel like I've said it so many times in therapy and everything that it's like whatever. But yeah, I've worked through a lot of that stuff with them, and it's been like amazing just to see how powerful a group of healed guys is, with each other, with like being able to support each other. And it's been huge for me because, when I would like, I actually just a couple weeks ago shared something with them about, that I'm in this big transition phase and getting out of the military and this and that. And I told them this story about like this traumatic thing that happened to me, that, where there's these guys were kind of like just shitting on me, dude. And it just, I really didn't want to be there, and it was horrible. But, and I cried like in front of other guys, and it was like, I told the men's group, like, man, I shouldn't have done that, dude. Like that, I mean, nobody likes to see that, but like, they kind of like were like, what a fucking, like, how weak of this dude, And but it was because they were asking me about my kids, my daughters, and like basically like me feeling like I wasn't a good father, and it hit me, pretty hard, and I. Got a little misty-eyed. And when I told them that story, like I think I said something like I cried like a little bitch or something, and they were like, they didn't like that I said that. They were like, man, one of the guys at the end, man, he said, you know, like, because I kind of sorry, I'm going all over the place with this. This is hard for me, but yeah. I kind of clarified it by saying like, oh, well, I just feel like they didn't deserve it. They didn't deserve that part of me. They didn't deserve that like realness for me. But one of the guys at the end of the meeting, he said, you know, like, I heard you say that like they didn't deserve it and whatever, and like, he basically said, you know, maybe they didn't see like how strong you are, or how you know, they weren't in they weren't like emotionally evolved enough or whatever to appreciate your situation and everything. But he was like, but I want to tell you, man, that like I see it. He said, I want to tell you that I'm proud of you, and like I like how you were in that situation. That's how I would want you to be, basically. So just like those kind of conversations and that kind of stuff, man, is like the polar opposite of what I experienced there. Oh shit, my bad. My headphones died and now we're on speaker, so that just blasted all of you guys. Yeah, sorry, this is getting to be kind of a long story, but yeah, man, we do have a lot of work to do, but I see that there's groups of guys who are doing it, and I know like how strong it can be, you know. And I've always like kind of viewed I don't know, man, I don't know where I got this from. It was like social construct, conditioning shit or whatever, or I think it was like some of my role models growing up, like Bruce Lee and whatever. But I always kind of looked at masculinity as being this thing where it's like, you know, I'm not here to like dictate and dominate. I'm more here to, you know, be like a noble, like a martial artist. You know, like what they talk about in martial arts, like your martial arts isn't to go out and like kick the shit out of people because you don't like them. It's like was the Spider-Man thing, like with great power comes great responsibility. It's like you only use this power for defense, to defend yourself and people you care about. So that's kind of maybe where I got it from, but that's like kind of how I always looked at my role. You know, it's like even with the girls last Friday, it was kind of like that. It was like, you know, we're here like enabling this like good time in a way, like by providing a safe space or whatever. And I don't know, that's just kind of how I always looked at it. I'm not saying that's the right way or I know anything, but that's how I feel about it. Anyways, let's get back to, let me get off of my soapbox here. I need a commune with good boundaries, like I want my own space in addition to community. A lot of communes in the 60s had no boundaries. Oh yeah, like the free love and you know, you're not your own property. Yeah, I hear you. Yeah, I feel like we just gotta respect each other, you know, wherever we're at the time. I think the empathy stuff and the heart space stuff is the key, really. We need to break away from all this attachment, start being connected to everyone and everything as like we are, as one, like we are. I feel that, Richard, man. I feel that on a deep level. You know, I feel that in meditation. I feel that in, you know, some of the experiences I've had with psychedelics. I feel that. I just feel that, man. I'm glad you said that. Your son's dad is that way. It's unfair. I'm sorry about that, Monique. Decide on what resources your community will start with. Solar, water, food, education, and decide the flow of monetary sustainability. When I started my co-op, I never would have guessed it would survive financially, and we help each other. We help each other parent, eat well, educate each other, emotional support. We don't grow food yet. We started where we could. People are good. We have good hearts and want to lead. These kids are incredible. Oh man, I'm so behind on the chat, guys. I'm really sorry. This is like, I know you're responding to what we were talking about like way earlier with the school shootings and stuff. By explaining success isn't defined by wealth. Success is defined by effort. It's tough to counter parent. I do my best. I hear you, Monique. I felt like that the whole time I was in the Navy. Like I'd start building my team of my kids and like getting them, going on a good path, and then somebody will just come and like just shit all over it and derail everything. Some higher up kid. I do see you, man, Richard. My mom is an amazing human. I think we're gonna. I talked to her about coming to visit you. She's been a little busy. She just had a cataract surgery and she's been helping out Shirley Ann, who's I think it's her cousin, or maybe it's her aunt. Maybe it's her aunt. I don't know. She's been not doing too well though. But yeah, it would be nice to come out and hang out with you, Tiffany. There's a saying that goes something like this: a clenched fist can never give nor receive. I love that. I don't think I've ever heard that before. Oh man, I'm so behind. You're talking about they do. Me and my brother have talked about this, like killing martyring the saviors forever. That's what like the story of Jesus is, and it's just Socrates. The story of Socrates is the same. They'll kill him, and then they'll be like, oh shit, they did know what they were talking about. But then they'll just like totally fuck mangle whatever they were talking about in the first place and turn it into some like manipulation bullshit. But I really like what Jamie Wheel says about it. I think that's really how it works, because he's saying like he calls them hungry ghosts, which is I think like a Korean folklore reference. But it's kind of like moths being drawn to the light. They're just going towards it because they want it, but they don't know why. Like it's like a natural function. They want this like power and prestige and like adoration and appreciation and followership and everything, but they don't understand like what's at the heart of it. They're trying to like consume that energy. They're like an energy vampire in a way. So they want to like feed off of that like life force, because they can see that it's like life affirming, it's like giving some good, but they don't really get like the core of it, the depth of it, and I don't think it's like necessarily like they're just born like dysfunctional or evil or something. I think it's more of a like a self-work problem, like an awareness problem. And I think there's ways that we can overcome that, Okay, kind of like the best way to fix humanity is fix themselves. Be the example. Yeah, I guess that's what we were just saying, right? Dr. King, utilizing Bible passage, says love conquers a multitude of sin. He's saying selflessness, which is love, we can unite with our enemy. Yeah, I totally feel that, Lavaris. I see that so much, and like the real Christianity. I feel like that's really what it's all about. Like it's a way of liberation, It's a way of liberation from that, the same thing Hegel was talking about, the Lord and bondsman relationship. Yeah. See you, Lou. I think you already left, but I appreciate you coming, man. We went a little over. We were planning for 7:30, but this has been a great conversation. We have a lot of more in common, and I would be honored to be a part of it. Yeah, bro. I would love to have you there, man. I mean, the men's group or the ranch, either one, both. Super excited to see the healing of men in real time. Yeah, I think there's a lot. It's weird because that whole, what do they call it, the manosphere? Me and my brother started a separate one, to bring some more people in, which I think we're going to kickstart again after the new year. My brother got a little bit busy, and I got like super depressed, and I was in the hospital for a little while because of that. But yeah, I think we're talking about kickstarting it like February-ish. But I see a lot of like, there's a spectrum, right? There's like the red pill stuff on one side, and then there's like the, let's like be super hippie granola backpacker dudes on this side. And, like none of them are that like, granola, but, some of them here, like, there's one that I think is kind of cool, what is it called? Sacred Sons, maybe. That they do some dude stuff. They have like a little on their little workshop retreats things. They have like a little fighting circle where you can get in there and like wrestle a random guy, and it's like totally, you're not supposed to hurt each other or whatever, but it's also kind of like you guys, figure it out between yourselves, but yeah, it's a weird space, because a lot of them, they really still want to be like, I'm a tough guy, and I don't know. It's just a weird world. I cry when it comes up. I cry more than a few days from gratitude. Yeah, I've done it too, man. There's nothing wrong with it, dude. There's really nothing wrong with it. Yeah, thanks, Alexandria. We're coming out of a desensitized way of processing life. I'm glad that shifted. I'm glad that you have a loving group. Oh, yeah. First rule of Sacred Sons or whatever. Yeah. I don't think I would do that. I don't know. I think it's cool. Like, I used to do martial arts and all that, so it's good. There's good stuff to it, but I don't know if I would. Plus, like, one of my things is part of what I talked to my brother about all that, and I'm like happy to be a part of it, but I told him like, I'd rather just support you in it and give you like complete creative control over it, because I was even telling Nick about this at our thing on Friday. Like, dude, there's no way I could ever be like, even if I got so lucky and worked hard enough to like become a billionaire, there's no way I could be a billionaire. There's just no possible way that I could ever do that. Because I just don't believe in that, man. Like, I will give all my money and shit away to other shit. Like, I'm not saying like I would impoverish myself, but like there's just no possible way. Like, if I started a coffee shop, right? And there's one that did that here in San Diego, this place called Better Buzz. They're trying to give Starbucks a run for their money. So like the first time I went there, the coffee shop was really cool, awesome place. Like, and it got so popular that then they started another one, and now they started one here in my town, which isn't that far away from the originals, but it's they got several around San Diego now, and the one they started here it's like a McDonald's basically. It's like you can tell that they're just trying to do basically what Starbucks did, follow that kind of same model and just make a bunch of money. And like, to me, that's selling out, man. Like, I always say on my articles and my Substack and everything, like, I'm never going to do some kind of affiliate program or advertising or some like bullshit that I don't believe in, unless it's like somebody I know and I really trust and believe in what they're doing. I'm not gonna promote any shit like that for money, because I feel like it's an integrity thing, you know. I just I just can't do it, you know. So like that's a limiting factor in itself. But like if I had a coffee shop like that, my first thought is not to like become like Starbucks and fucking run everybody else out of business and nobody else gets to sell coffee because I got the best coffee. Like, no, man. If you want to start a coffee shop, I want you to do your thing too and like live your dream. You know, I want you to be able to have your thing that you really believe in also. And like I'm not like I don't view you as a threat to me or like a competition or something. Like if that's what you love and that's what you're into, like I support it, dude. You know, like I just don't get it. And I don't want to live that way and I don't want to be like that. So like there's no possible way I could ever you know, I'm just not ever going to do it. You know, even if I, like I said, got lucky enough or whatever. Oh yeah, I feel you, dude. I got a little bit of that going on too. Let me see if I can pick up what you're putting down, man. We need more enlightened people with money because money is energy and a tool to use it to help enlighten others. Start a bunch of businesses. Sure, yeah. I mean, I like Wallace Wattles' Science of Getting Rich and you know, The Secret and those kind of things. Like, I believe you're right. It's like a tool to leverage, and I even think some of these people are like well-intentioned. Like Google. I saw a podcast the other day. This guy, Robert Epstein, was talking about how Google's like subtly manipulating election stuff and, you know, neuro-linguistic programming shit and modifying people's search results and sending like register to vote reminders and go vote reminders to people, like certain people in certain areas. And it's mostly like in favor of Democrats, but not all. You know, for example, they really don't like Elizabeth Warren because Elizabeth Warren is talking, she's one of the main people that talks about get money out of politics and fuck Google and fuck big tech and all that. So they don't like her. So they're funding her opponent, which is a Republican. So it's totally not like political party specific necessarily, but it is like, I think those guys, Sergey Brin and whatever, I think that they feel like they're like the philosopher king people that we were talking about earlier. They think that they know better, right? And they should be the ones who get to say like how everything goes. And it's like, well, we have the money and we have the power and we can do it. I don't think they're like inherently evil people. I mean, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe they are, but like, I think that that's like how we get caught up sometimes. It's like, well, if I just like rose to the top, then I could fix all this shit, you know. And I don't want to fall victim to that, you know. I don't want to be king of the world. I really don't. And at the same time, yeah, I do want to have enough economic freedom to, you know, to have some kind of impact on all that stuff. But I think it goes deeper than that, you know, like what we're talking about, Richard, is more of even like a spiritual kind of level, you know, and like what we were talking about earlier with the developmentalism and like postmodernism, if you want to call it that, you know, moving beyond that whole worldview and mentality. Because they're still stuck in that. I think that's even something that Steve was talking about. Steve McIntosh on his developmentalist stuff was talking about trying to influence business leaders to move beyond that. I also saw this crazy tweet the other day, man. I wish I had it here. I could pull it up and show you guys. It was something about like a venture capitalist. It was some woman in tech like saying venture capitalists was like pulling funding or something because their founder pretty much like gave up after he went on an ayahuasca trip. And then another guy was like retweeting it with his thing, and he was saying, "Don't go on. Don't." He was like, "Watch out for this ayahuasca. It's dangerous. It'll make you like stop believing in, trying to get rich, basically." And I was like, "No, man. They needed. We need more of that. More people need to go do that." Depends on how you look at money. It's a tool for me to help. Yeah, I feel you, man. Yeah, same here, Richard. I know, dude. It's a hard conversation too. People get weird about money, and I don't know, man. I don't know. I really don't know. I don't know the answers. I just I feel like I could have the integrity and like honor to do the right thing. But I think I would use it like kind of what you were saying. Like if I had that much money, dude, I would definitely start the community. I would like start multiple ones, but not like me being in control of it. You know what I mean? Like I would just, here you go. And that's what I'm saying. I'd probably go broke. I'd probably go back to normal doing that. Yeah, man. Well, same here, brother. I think that's the best we can do, man. Like I love that whole idea of, I think it's Buckminster Fuller. I got a poster of him on my wall over there. I think he's the one who said that whole thing with the like spaceship Earth idea. I like a lot of his thought, but he's also like, he's a little bit like he's in the modernist view of things a little bit, and he would have ended up doing the same thing. He even did that with his like projects. He was like, "No, I'm the smartest person in the room here, and I get to say what." But anyways, he talks about, he has like a book called Instruction Manual for Operating Spaceship Earth, and he uses that analogy. He says like we get born here, and we have this time, about 100 years, and we're born into this like dysfunctional family / team that is operating this spaceship Earth, and we get to like contribute to the management of it during the time that we're here. And then when our time is done, it's somebody else's turn. It's next the next shift takes over. And I don't know, I always thought that was kind of a cool way to think of it. Like even kind of like on a spiritual level, if you believe in the whole like Hindu cosmogony stuff, where it's like you're like a drop of water, and when you die you go back to the ocean, and then you can come separate again and into a new iteration or whatever. Even if you think of it that way, it's like, all right, it's my turn to go. It's my turn to go down there again, man, and see if I can do some good. What's funny to me is starting all this sounds a little bit culty, but without all the fuckery, control, and trauma. Yeah, for sure, Alexandria. I've heard that before from some of my friends. Like, I mean, I'm sure probably the '60s people not only experienced that criticism, but actually did start some cults. I mean, Charles Manson's thing was part of that, right? But I think the danger of that is like rallying around a charismatic leader. That's why I'm so adamant about the democratization piece and the transparency around that, because it's easy for that to happen. Even in a democracy, it's easy for that to happen. You're right, Rich. Yeah, I don't know if you've read like the Dune books, Alexandria, but I feel like that's like the major theme of that whole saga, and I don't want to spoil it for you. If you haven't read it and you want to watch all the the movies. Yeah, exactly, Richard. That's what I'm talking about, man. It's like we can all like help each other to be good at that. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. Um, yeah, I won't spoil it. I won't ruin it for you. I forget I said that. All this sounds so amazing, and it's been the closest I've been to how easy it would be to want to join one for someone who feels lost. Yeah. Yeah, I hear you. I think too another like key piece of it is like keeping it small. Something that we've talked about here too is a lot on the stream is the concept of the monkey sphere and Dunbar's number. You might have been in some of those conversations, but you know, it applies to a lot of the government stuff. People say like, oh, socialism only works on a small scale, or communism only works on a small scale. And, as it turns out, apparently so capitalism only works on a small scale too. Yeah, right? I think, so the Dunbar's number or the monkey sphere idea is this idea, it's in biology, psychology, evolutionary psychology. Robin, I think his name is Robin Dunbar, came up with it, and he wrote some papers and he wrote a book about it. But he draws on all of that. It's like a multidisciplinary field of study. But he proposes this idea that the human brain, our capacity to maintain close emotional relationships with other people, is limited to about 150. And it might be a little more for some people, might be a little less, depending on their biology and their, childhood development, all that stuff. But that this is the reason why like road rage and like, raging at people on the internet is so easy, because it's easy to dehumanize people that you don't have that with. They're not like part of your tribe. So, the guy who wrote the monkey sphere, who coined that term, he said something, I think, in his article about road rage, and like how if somebody cut you off on the highway and you're like, this motherfucker, dude, and you like speed up to get next to him, like, I gotta just see this person's face who did this to me, and you look over and it's your grandmother, like you'd probably have like an immediate context shift, and you would start maybe thinking about like, man, she sucks at driving, or like, I hope she's okay, or she didn't bring her glasses, or so. But I think that's there's a lot more to it, right? Like when you're in a car, you don't see people's faces, like there's less of a human. But the same applies for social media. There's no like body language, tone of voice, facial expressions, things that like help us humanize other people. But at the same time, he talks about how this causes problems in organizations and like teams in corporations and that kind of stuff when they get too big. And it turns into like this tribalism and in-group, out-group stuff that's just natural for humans. So I don't know. I think that's like all that stuff. That's why I think the power of, the community and diversity in the community and like the neurodivergence stuff and everything, and just honoring like what value and knowledge and insight and thoughts people are bringing to the table is important, because like you guys will think of things that I won't think about, and it shouldn't be like just one person's say so. But then once it gets to be too many people, it's like, well, who the fuck is that guy, and what right does he have to say something right here, because I've never seen that guy in my life. Oh yeah, you're talking about the Stanford prison experiment, yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's like a dehumanization thing. Yeah. Yeah, that's wild. Yeah, I really think like I can see how the self awareness stuff and the teaching kids from a young age about this kind of stuff and encouraging and just inviting development and growth like continuously can lead to us like bypassing a lot of those kind of pitfalls and roadblocks more readily. I really think that like we we were talking about that in this leadership class a lot. This was one of the reasons I'm glad to be getting out of the Navy, because everybody was like, this fucking guy, dude. But they love to complain about like this new generation of kids is so fucking lazy, and like they always ask too many questions and this and that and whatever. But it's long been my belief that our kids will do better than us. Like what you were saying, Richard. You were saying about healing generational traumas and those kind of things. I think that's the reason why they'll do better than us. And every generation forever has always said that. There's like I think I put a meme about it though. There's like some like 2000 BC Sumerian tablet talking about how the end of the world is near because the next generation is like squandering everything. Milgram experiment. Oh, okay, maybe I was confusing it then. I thought it was a Stanford prison experiment. I think there might be some similarities or whatever, but okay, it was at Yale. Oh, it was like during the Nuremberg trials, huh? That's funny. I never realized that. Like I've heard of that experiment before, but I didn't know the doctor, the researcher, was inspired by this question. Could it be that Adolf Eichmann and his accomplices in the Holocaust were just following orders? Because that was their defense. That was their trial defense. I actually referenced that a lot. How he said he was just doing his job and like... Yeah, but you're right. It's all the same. Same thing. We're talking about the dehumanization stuff. I don't think they gave fatal shocks to anybody in this. This was just like... This was more of like a... they assigned people these like fake roles, like you're going to be the guards and you're going to be the prisoners, and the guards just like started being assholes for no reason. It's like a absolute power corrupts absolutely type of thing. Which I don't agree with, by the way. I don't think that's a true statement. I feel like it just it's more of a test of character. It provides a lot of opportunity. Self-awareness and us knowing we are not our thoughts or our feelings or our body or our basic life skills, they have stopped us from what I've learned. Yeah. They stripped from us. Yeah. Yeah, I agree, Richard. I think, oh man, it's crazy because we were talking about this like evolution of consciousness stuff and the Renaissance and the Enlightenment and everything, and I really feel like this was part of like, I think from what I can see from like my reading of history and philosophy and all that stuff, mostly history, is that this was like a thing from the Romans. The Romans co-opted Christianity because it was like destroying them from within, and they bureaucratized it and turned it into something that it wasn't originally, and they used it to stop people from doing all the other stuff, and that like eventually gets to the point where like the Spanish are like burning the Mayans codexes and like destroying all of this knowledge of like spiritual freedom, basically, including the use of plant medicines and everything. That they were like, all these pagan cults back then were doing all that stuff, man. They were doing like more elaborate substance induced ritual exploration of spirituality and consciousness than we do now. You know, they were more in tune with that stuff than we were in a lot of ways. I mean, in a lot of ways, they were way more like violent and savage, but you know, like they were, man, there's just so much weird stuff that was going on back then. But you know, I get it. It's all part of the process. But yeah, I feel like that stripping of like spiritual meaning and like liberation is just like it's just like another mode of control, really. You know, absolutely they will. I have no doubt these kids are locked into making things better. Their resistance to the hustle challenge is our addiction to being busy for yeah, bro. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, man. I've been reading a lot about some of that like esoterica stuff. I love that stuff, dude. You know, I have a really good friend who's a PhD in that stuff. He wrote his dissertation on like it's funny you're talking about that earlier, Alexander. He's talking about cult, you know, like cult ideological. I mean, it's kind of like on ideological conflicts, but you know, in the context of cults. But yeah, he's really into a lot of that stuff, like magic and you know, like Anton LaVey type stuff and everything. But I've been reading a lot about that, you know, lately. It's like early Christianity and like it's almost from like with new eyes, because I learned a lot of that stuff before I read Gene Gebser and that whole kind of like consciousness shift stuff. And it's crazy to think about, man, like how just people saw the world so differently, you know, because we're born like kind of assuming that everybody thought of things this way, like rationally, logically, scientifically, and whatever. And that definitely wasn't the case, as it seems, you know, from the way that they talk and the art that they did and all that. And that's really a lot what Gebser is talking about. But for instance, like one of the things that's related to it that he doesn't mention, but there's a psychologist named Julian Jaynes that wrote a book called the bicameral, something about the bicameral mind, where he makes all these arguments and he leans heavy on psychology and neuroscience stuff. But he argues that before a certain point in history, humans didn't consider their internal monologue to be themselves. They thought it was their ancestors guiding them, or like a god or deities like talking to them. So it was kind of like like the dialogue was between them and like divinity or something, or some like kind of spiritual entities, you know. And I don't know. It's just all really it's all really mind blowing, man, because the like that concept it aligns with what Gebser is talking about in philosophy and like this shift towards egoism, and like that's what the Renaissance was. The Renaissance was these Italian dudes who were pissed at the Catholic Church, who are very Christian, criticizing the Catholic Church for being unconcerned with human individuals, and like exploiting them and being corrupt and, you know, using their position of power to take advantage of people and make them pay money to them for no reason or whatever. Like they were arguing that they weren't really following God. They were just, you know, in it for their own gain, and that the church doctrine and Christianity itself should shift more towards a focus on individual humans. And I don't think they knew that where that was going to lead to. But at the same time, in philosophy, Rene Descartes did his whole thing with the I think therefore I am thing. And it makes sense, like when we learn about it in philosophy classes or whatever, and if you learned about it in high school or you watch a YouTube video on it, usually they just present it to you like piecemeal, without the context. But what he's actually saying is, you can doubt everything. This might be a dream. How do you know anything's real? But at least I know that I must exist. Like my mind exists because I'm having this thought. Like I'm able to question this. So that's his starting point. But if you think about it, that starting point is the self. It is the ego. You know, so he starts from there and then builds his whole philosophy from that. And this happened at the same period of time in human consciousness, like this revolution of consciousness. So I don't know, man. It's super interesting to see like the flow of all of that. After NDE, I came back with new eyes and mouth and heart to love. Yeah, that's crazy, dude. I can't wait. Like I know you've mentioned that to me before, and I really want to hear that story from you, man. I just want to hear it. Yeah, we should talk on the phone soon, man, or whatever. Being downloaded, but I was only in surgery for 7 hours. Wow, dude. Yeah, I love that. Dude, I've listened to so many of those. There's some channel on YouTube where it's like testimonials of NDEs, and like everybody says the same. It's so crazy, man. Like so many people say the same. They have the same experience. I mean, I guess it's like, I don't know. People say like skeptic science people say like, oh well, it makes sense because everybody's human and the same like physiological things are happening. It's like a hallucination or whatever. But I don't know, man. There's just I feel like there's got to be something more there, you know, like even just some of that, like just how can you explain like knowing certain things sometimes? Like you ever had an experience like that where you just like knew something and you didn't know how? It was just like, or you know, like you thought of somebody that you haven't talked to since like the 5th grade, and then they fucking send you a message or call you or something. Or just like weird shit like that, man. Or where you like feel like somebody's looking at you and you turn around and they're looking at you. Like, I don't know, man. I guess they can explain all these things where they say like, oh, it's coincidences or whatever, and it's bound to happen like a certain percentage of times, dude. But I feel like some of these things are just like way too improbable, man. It's like, and like pretty much everybody has that, you know. Took me forever to talk about it. I don't want people to think I was crazy. Now I share it, and I met a few people that have similar thoughts on it. Yeah, bro. Yeah, man, we went, dude, we went an extra hour plus tonight, dude. I think I'm going to wrap it up. Dude, this was a great stream. A few people have like trickled out already. I really appreciate you guys being here. I didn't know where this conversation was going to go. I didn't even use it. I like wrote a little script and stuff, and I barely even used it at the beginning. But yeah, dude, thanks for coming, man. I'm really glad you were here, dude. Your voice, your input was such a contribution, man, and I'm looking forward to talking to you on the phone soon. I'll hit you up. We'll set something up. And to everybody else who's still here, appreciate you too. And same time, I'll be here same time next week. And we can talk about whatever you guys want to talk about. If you want to come on too and like have a voice, voice to voice conversation, I'm totally down for that. Always. Until then, take care. See you guys.